Imagine a workspace where the margin for error isn't just slim, it's basically non-existent.
Right.
You have a patient, their heart is literally being beaten for them by a machine. Another machine is breathing for them.
And you have a whole bank of pumps delivering medications where, I mean, a variance of a single microgram could cause a massive stroke.
Or cardiac arrest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate high-stakes environment. The ICU is this collision of advanced tech, fragile physiology, and split-second decisions.
It sounds absolutely terrifying. And I think in that environment, there's a huge gap between a nurse who is just, surviving the shift
Just keeping their head above water.
and one who is actually mastering the chaos. So today we're going to try and bridge that gap. We're doing a deep dive into a guide by Timothy Simpson.
And this guy isn't some academic. He's a Ccrn with 22 years of ICU experience. He's been in the trenches.
Precisely. So we're not just talking about being a good nurse in some vague sense. We're analyzing the specific architecture of what he calls the expert ICU nurse. We're going to break down his three-pillar framework.
Which is the essential skills, the critical thinking, and then the roadmap to getting your Ccrn.
It's really a blueprint for excellence. Whether you're a new grad who's terrified or a veteran looking to sharpen your skills, this is about getting from competence to true mastery.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's get into the weeds. Pillar 1 is the toolkit. Simpson argues there are 5 essential skill categories you have to balance. And the first one is the big one, the barrier to entry. Technical and clinical proficiency.
The hardware.
The hardware.
And this is the scary stuff, right, for new nurses. You walk into a room and it looks like the cockpit of a 747.
Yeah.
But Simpson makes a really vital distinction. Proficiency isn't just knowing which button to push when an alarm goes off. It's about mastering that life support tech until it's like an extension of your own senses.
He gets really specific, too. He mentions things like continuous renal replacement therapy, CRRT, and intra-aortic balloon pumps. Let's pause on CRRT. For anyone listening who thinks that's just, dialysis, what's the difference?
Oh, it's a world of difference, a way more complex. CRRT is a continuous 24-hour-a-day management of a blood circuit outside the body.
Because the patient's kidneys have completely failed and they're too unstable for normal dialysis.
Exactly. You can't just run them on a normal machine. It would totally crash their blood pressure.
So you're balancing the machine against the patient's own instability.
Constantly. You're managing the pressures in that circuit, the fluid balance down to the milliliter, and the anticoagulation to keep the whole filter from clotting.
Wow.
If you mess up the pressures, you lose the circuit. And if you lose the circuit, you can lose a significant amount of the patient's blood volume that's trapped in there. It is constant vigilance.
That is a high wire act. And the intra-aortic balloon pump, that sounds even more intense.
It is. It's a device that's actually sitting inside the patient's aorta, and it's counterpulsating. So it inflates when the heart relaxes to push blood into the coronary arteries.
Okay.
And then it deflates right before the heart beats to create this sort of vacuum, reducing the workload.
So you have to understand the timing perfectly.
Perfectly. You have to read the waveform on the monitor. If it triggers at the wrong time, you could actually make a failing heart work harder.
So the big takeaway here, you have to know the machine so well that you can look past it to the patient.
That's it. That's the whole game. Which leads right into his second category. Advanced assessment. He calls it the detective work.
I love that because in the ICU, the patient often can't tell you what's wrong, right?
Not at all. They might be sedated, intubated, comatose. They can't say, hey, I'm feeling a little off. So you have to be a detective. You're piecing together clues from labs, from arterial blood gases, from hemodynamic numbers. You're looking for the smoke before there's a 5-alarm fire.
Give us an example of smoke. What does that look like?
It's almost never one big thing. It's subtle. It's watching a lactate level creep up from, say, 1.5 to 2.1. It's noticing a small drop in their mixed venous oxygen saturation. These are tiny trends that are screaming tissue hypoxia hours before the blood pressure actually falls off a cliff. And Simpson really emphasizes using standardized tools here to take the guesswork out.
He brings up RASS and CPOT. I think these are crucial because they create a common language on the unit.
100%.
Yeah.
RAS is the Richmond Agitation Sedation Scale. So instead of just writing the patient is kind of sleepy,
Right.
we can say they're a -3, and everyone, the doctor, the pharmacist, the next nurse, knows exactly what that means.
And CPOT.
That's the critical care pain observation tool. Since the patient can't say, ouch, we're looking at things like facial tension, body movements. Are they fighting the ventilator?
Yeah.
And we score their pain objectively.
It turns something subjective into actual data.
Right. Which lets us treat their pain humanely, even when they can't ask for help.
Okay, so that leads to category 3, resuscitation and emergency response, the crisis.
This is where it all comes together. Obviously, you need to know your ACLS protocols cold. That's just the price of admission.
The baseline.
The absolute baseline. You have to know the epidose, the shockable rhythms, but Simpson talks about the X factor.
And the X factor is just staying calm.
It's the ability to suppress your own panic response. When a patient codes, panic is contagious. But so is calm. The expert nurse becomes the eye of the storm. They know the algorithm so well, they're not thinking about the next step, they're just doing it.
Which frees up brain power.
Yes. It frees up their brain to think, why did this patient code in the first place?
That calm execution is a superpower. Okay, now the fourth category is a total gear shift. It's communication. Simpson calls the nurse the hub.
And it's the perfect analogy. Think of the ICU team as a wheel. You have the doctor, the respiratory therapist, the pharmacist, the dietitian, all the spokes. And the nurse is the hub connecting them all. If you don't communicate effectively, the wheel just breaks. You're constantly translating the pharmacist's concern to the doctor and the doctor's new plan to the respiratory therapist.
And that communication has to extend to the families. This is the soft skill part, but man, it sounds incredibly hard.
It's often the hardest part of the job. You're meeting people on what is probably the worst day of their entire lives.
Wow.
And you have to explain why their loved one is paralyzed and flipped on their stomach and hooked up to a dozen machines. And you have to do it in plain English while also navigating their trauma. And, like Simpson points out, you have to be culturally competent. You have to bring their values into this super high-tech world.
High-tech has to stay high-touch.
It has to.
Which brings us to the last skill in the toolkit, organization. The juggling act.
Oh, yeah. This is pure logistics. You've got an unstable patient, you have meds due, a dressing change, a family meeting, a line to re-zero, and then their pressure tanks. You can't do it all at once.
You have to prioritize.
Strategically, you have to ask, what will kill this patient the fastest? You fix that first, everything else has to wait.
Okay, so that's the toolkit. We've got the tech, the detective work, crisis response, communication, and organization. But Simpson's point is, you can be good at all of that and still not be an expert.
Exactly. Tasks are just the what. To be an expert, you need to master the how, and more importantly, the why. Which brings us to pillar 2, the critical thinking engine.
I love this idea of an engine, and he makes a point that I think is so important. Critical thinking isn't a personality trait. You aren't born with it.
No, it's a skill, 100%. It's developed through deliberate practice. And he outlines a few strategies to build it. The first one is strengthening the knowledge foundation.
Which goes back to that why.
Yes. Take pharmacology. A novice nurse knows that, say, norepinephrine raises blood pressure.
Sure.
An expert knows how. They know it stimulates alpha-adrenergic receptors, causing intense vasoconstriction.
But why does that distinction matter in the heat of the moment? As long as the pressure goes up, who cares about the mechanism?
Oh, it matters immensely.
Yeah.
Because if you know it causes intense vasoconstriction, you anticipate the cost of that. You know it might clamp down on blood flow to the gut or to the fingers and toes.
Yeah.
You're not just treating a number on a monitor. You are managing a physiological trade-off. And you can spot the complication before it becomes a disaster because you understand the why.
That makes so much sense. It's like you can predict the future a little bit. That leads to his second strategy, which I think is the most actionable part of this whole guide. Structured reflection. The after-action review.
This is huge. It's borrowed from fields like aviation and the military. The idea is, after a big event, a code, a rough admission, even just a weird shift,
Yeah.
you don't just go home and forget about it. You debrief with yourself.
What are the questions you should be asking yourself?
He lays out 4. What was the primary problem? Why did I make the decision I made? What was the outcome? And the big one, what could I do differently next time?
It turns every single shift into a lesson. You're not just surviving, you're mining it for data.
Exactly. And he pairs this with what he calls the what-if habit.
I love this. It sounds like a mental game to stay sharp.
It is. When the unit is quiet, which we never say out loud, but,
We never see the keyword. No.
never. But when there's downtime, you run mental simulations. You look at your patient and think, okay, what if their pressure doesn't respond to this fluid I just gave? What's my next move? Or what if they flip into AFib right now? Is the amiodarone ready? Are the defib pads connected?
You're preloading the decisions.
Yes. You're building the neural pathways. So when the emergency actually happens, your brain already recognizes the pattern. You've lived it mentally, so you don't freeze. It cuts down the cognitive load in a crisis.
That is just brilliant. Okay, strategy 3 is evidence-based practice, EBP. This can sound a little academic. How does it work at the bedside?
It's about fighting that we've always done it this way mentality. Simpson uses nutrition protocols as a great example. There's real evidence about how to feed ICU patients to protect their gut. Using a protocol forces you to evaluate the patient against data, not just habit. It just aligns your care with the current science.
And the last strategy here is risk awareness and simulation.
This is the proactive part. You're always scanning for risks, pressure, ulcers, infections. And he's a huge advocate for simulation. The sim lab is the safe place to fail. You want to mess up the code on a mannequin, not on someone's grandma in bed 4.
So true. Okay, so we've built the toolkit, we fired up the critical thinking engine. Now let's talk about validation. For a lot of people listening, the goal is those 4 letters, Ccrn.
The Critical Care Registered Nurse Certification. It's the gold standard from the AACN. It tells everyone that you have truly mastered this material.
But it's not a participation trophy. You have to qualify. Let's break down the eligibility math because it can be confusing.
It's very strict. First, you need an unencumbered RN license. No issues there. Then you have 2 paths. Path A is the 2-year option. You need 1,750 hours of direct patient care in the last 2 years.
And a certain amount has to be recent.
Right. At least 875 of those hours have to be in the year right before you apply.
Okay, so that's for the full-timers. What about people who are part-time or have been doing it longer?
That's Path B, the 5-year option. You need 2,000 hours total over 5 years, but only 144 hours in the most recent year, so it's more flexible.
Got it. So you're eligible, now you have to face the exam. What does that beast look like?
It's 150 questions, but only 125 are scored to get 3 hours. But here is the secret sauce. Simpson breaks down the exam blueprint, and this is how you can hack your study plan.
Okay, everyone listening, lean in for this part. Where are the points?
The test is 80% clinical judgment, 20% professional caring and ethics. But inside that 80%, 3 body systems just dominate. If you master these 3, you're well on your way.
Let's hear them.
Cardiovascular is king. It's 17% of the exam. Respiratory is right behind at 15%. And multi-system, which is basically sepsis and shock, is 14%.
Wait, so if you did the math on that, that's almost half the test right there.
Exactly. 46% of your score comes from the heart, the lungs, and shock.
That is a massive strategic advantage for studying.
It's huge. I see so many nurses stressing out, spending weeks on, like, rare endocrine disorders. And yeah, they're on the test. But if you are shaky on hemodynamics or ventilator modes, you are studying wrong. You have to focus on the big 3. That's the highest yield.
So what's the battle plan? How does Simpson say to approach studying?
He recommends a sprint, not a marathon. 4 to 6 weeks of really focused study while you're working. If you drag it out for 6 months, you'll forget what you learned at the beginning. It's about total immersion.
And step 1 is to get the official handbook.
Yes. Download the free Ccrn exam handbook from the ACCN's website. It has that blueprint we just talked about. Then get a good study guide. But the most critical thing, and he really emphasizes this, is taking timed practice tests.
Why is the timed part so important? Can't you just do questions on your phone?
You can, and that helps with content knowledge. But the timed tests are about building stamina. 3 hours of intense critical thinking is mentally exhausting. You need to train your brain to be as sharp on question 125 as it was on question 1. It's mental endurance.
That makes total sense. It's like training for an actual marathon.
It is. And plus, practice tests are the only way to find your real blind spots. It forces you to admit, okay, I don't really understand heart blocks, or I keep missing these shock questions. It tells you exactly where to focus your time.
And he also mentions community. Don't try to do it all by yourself.
Right. Find a study buddy, join a forum. It keeps you accountable on those days you'd rather just watch Netflix. It helps to have someone else in the trenches with you.
So let's just synthesize this whole journey. We started with the pure complexity of the ICU.
The machines, the drugs, all of it.
Then we built this toolkit, everything from managing a CRRT circuit to the soft skill of holding a family member's hand.
Then we talked about building that critical thinking engine, moving from what to why, and using that what-if game to prepare for a crisis before it even happens.
And finally, we laid out the strategy for the Ccrn, focus on cardio, respiratory, and multi-system. Take timed tests, get it done.
It's a whole package. But I think it's important we circle back to the real reason for all this.
Yeah.
We don't do this for a pin on our badge or a certificate on the wall.
It's not just for the pay bump either.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's nice. We do it for the person in the bed.
The patient who is completely relying on you to be that expert.
Exactly. When you're standing there at 3 in the morning and things are going wrong, you want to feel it in your bones that you have the skills and the knowledge to give that person the absolute best chance of survival. That's what this is all about.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought from his guide about that after-action review. We tend to measure our shifts by how busy we were, right? Or how many admits we got. But Simpson suggests the most important part of your shift might not be the care you gave while you were clocked in. It might be the questions you ask yourself on the drive home.
Why do I make that choice? What could I have done differently?
Exactly. Because that quiet reflection in the car on your own,
Mm,
that's where the expert is actually made.
I couldn't agree more. It's that commitment to be better tomorrow than you were today.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Go check your pulse, take a deep breath, and we'll catch you on the next one.